Hello everyone, and welcome to week 6, where we're going to be talking about aspects and transits in your natal chart. So this is of course the final week of the main course. I will over the next couple of days upload some links and some other information that might be helpful as well, so including Mercury and Chiron, the communication planet, the wounded healer planet. Also just links to other sites that you can look up different meanings and different suggestions for all of your natal chart placements from astrologers that that I've worked with myself or that I know and trust and that sort of thing. So I hope that'll be helpful as well. And of course, I know all of this is a lot to take in a short period of time. Normally when I teach one-on-one, I would kind of do one planet per week. And sort of spread it over 10 or 12 weeks, but everyone's been really on the ball. Some of your emails and feedback and stuff has been really fantastic. So if there's anything else you'd like to send through, please do. And of course, you're always welcome to continue to add comments on on the previous week's forum posts. If it's something you're only just catching up to, that's completely fine. So I will leave that up, of course, for probably a couple of months, so you can go back over things and read other people's responses and ask questions and do all that kind of thing. But today we're going to be talking about aspects and transits, which is getting a little bit more complex than just the placements, but I think it's something that's worth knowing. So at the moment, we're not going to go too heavily into calculating the degrees and all that kind of thing, but aspects, to look at your aspects, that is the table in your natal chart worksheet that has things like Sun sextile Mars, or Jupiter square Venus, that type of thing. So you may have 20 aspects, you may have 4 or 5 aspects, you'll have squares, sextiles, inconjuncts or quincunxes, conjunctions, oppositions, trines, all those sorts of things. So an aspect is the relationship between two planets at the time that you were born. And it's important to know the aspects because it means that those planets and their energies or their goals were engaging with each other, creating a dynamic that was happening or a conversation that was happening at the time that you were born. And that is also part of your soul's blueprint, which is of course your natal chart. So aspects are really fascinating things because it's not a case of all of the planets are moving, representing all these separate fragments of your soul. They're all working together, in this really complex, breathing, expanding kind of pattern, relationship, dynamic even. And so we look at the aspects to kind of see what is helping or hindering or influencing the way that each of our planets behaves, or what that planet wants us to express through our lifetime or through our soul's journey. So I'm going to go through each of them one by one, and then of course we'll have some questions, and I'd love you to post some of the aspects that you have as well, including ones that you might think are a little bit difficult. So we begin of course with conjunctions. And conjunctions are when two planets are directly next to each other. So when we calculate a conjunction, and again, this is not something that you have to do, this is kind of getting into like professional level astrology, but you already have it written down for you in the grid, so it's fine. But when you look at the amount of degrees, normally we would calculate about 5 or 6 degrees on either side would be a conjunction. So say you have your Venus at 20 degrees Virgo and your Mars is at 24 degrees Virgo. So that would be a Venus-Mars conjunction in your chart. So a conjunction, I'm going to explain all the dynamics in each of the aspects, kind of like a relationship, so that you can sort of compare them all. I hope it makes sense. So a conjunction is like siblings. It's like those planets want very similar things. They're obviously completely different functioning and have their own agenda, but they're very similar and they impact each other the same way that siblings do. So it's like a sibling relationship. It's like they know everything, they feed off each other. they work together, and you kind of can't look at one without the other. So if you have any conjunctions in your chart, you kind of need to look at both of those planets together, because one won't function without the other one, or one influences the other one very, very strongly, the same way that, you know, a sibling relationship would. So for example, I have Moon conjunct Jupiter. So the principles of Jupiter in my life have an impact on my feelings and emotions and self-esteem, which of course is my Moon. And likewise, the things that rule Jupiter in my life, so, you know, travel and personal growth and financial abundance and all that type of thing, is always very heavily influenced by how my Moon is feeling at any one time. So your conjunctions kind of feed each other like siblings. Now, in conjunctions or quincunxes, you can call them either thing. Astrologers just kind of have a couple of different names for them. This is a bit of an awkward relationship. So it's like they don't really get each other. In conjunctions tend to be signs that don't share any similarities and don't share any elements. For example, maybe Pisces and Leo. It's like what they want and how they function is so... There's so many birds just come flying past my window there. What those two planets want is so far from each other that they just don't even understand. They're not necessarily disagreeing or causing tension, but they just don't gel with each other. So you might find that there's a bit of awkwardness trying to balance those two parts of yourself. So that's an in conjunction or a quincunx. It's a bit like an awkward colleague. It's like you can't even really make small talk. You don't really know what makes them tick. So it's like those two planets don't really get each other. There's not a negative relationship, but you kind of have to focus on each one separately, and not try and lump them together and not try and please both at the same time. So I mean, I'll use an example. I'll use myself for an example. My sun, of course, is in Capricorn, and it's in conjunct my Jupiter, which is in Leo. So Jupiter in Leo wants to like express and like do theater and art and music and like drink cocktails and blah, 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 and do all these sorts of things, and is very bombastic, which I love. But then the Capricorn side is very serious and studious and wants to work hard and be of integrity, and is like, you know, you can't go off to Hollywood and do this because you have work to do and you have to be of service. And so there's definitely a sense of disagreement, I suppose, between the two of them. So I have to find outlets for them both separately. So that's in conjunctions or quincunxes. A square is a right angle relationship between the two planets. So if you have a square in your chart, it feels like an elbow in the side. It feels like it can be a bit annoying or a bit jarring. It can also feel awakening. And this is the thing, you know, I don't ever want you to think that there's certain aspects that are bad and certain aspects that are good. Because just because, and I'll explain a little bit further on, why an aspect might be very easy is not always the best thing. So, you know, if you are looking at your aspects going, oh my God, all I have is squares and oppositions and, you know, this is terrible, it doesn't mean that at all. It kind of means the opposite. So a square between two of your planets means that those planets kind of jar each other, they kind of surprise each other, but they stimulate each other as well. They awaken each other. So it's like one can't go off and do something without the other one kind of having an input, even in a way that might feel awkward at times. So you might have Venus, people, for example, with Venus square Pluto tend to attract very Plutonian types in relationships. They tend to attract very power-hungry people. They tend to attract either these really divine soulmate relationships, which is also very Plutonian, or sort of egotistical, controlling types. And they're like, my God, what am I doing? What's wrong with me? But as you can see, it's like their expression of love is being jarred by that Plutonian experience. So it's something they have to be aware of because it's impacting their Venus. So aspects are about how one planet is impacting the other. So that's a square. It's awakening, it's jarring. An opposition is a push-pull, and this is when planets are directly across from each other. So you might have your sun at 19 degrees Capricorn and you have your moon at 19 degrees Cancer. So they're opposing. That means they're kind of at war with each other. They want completely opposite things, and they push and pull you. And you'll probably notice that pattern in your life, that you veer, if you have an opposition, you veer between the both of them. And another interesting thing is, a lot of times our aspects tend to turn up in specific people in our lives. So, you know, you might have a, say, sun opposition moon, and you might have had a lot of trouble, you know, coming out from behind the way that your mother thought you should have behaved when you were growing up, or expressing yourself, or giving a voice to your emotional needs when you had to focus on your career or earning money to support the family, that type of thing. So there's a real division, there's a real push-pull there. So that can be difficult. But again, squares, oppositions, inconjuncts, they're not bad placements within themselves. So they're not bad aspects, because it's often those tensions that give us morals, or give us compassion, or give us extra insight or understanding into things. You know, because that's where our lessons are. So, you know, if you had your... Okay, so just as I said, you know, your sun in Capricorn and your moon in Cancer, and they were opposing, they were in opposition. Your moon, which is obviously in very intuitive, very sensitive Cancer, is pulling your Capricorn away from being too work-focused, too isolated, too single-minded. Whereas your Capricorn sun is forcing that moon to be more ambitious, and to see the bigger picture, and to detach from feeling overwhelmed. You know, so it's all of those things. And this is what's so amazing about the natal chart, is it is a soul blueprint. Everything in it is designed to work in this really divinely perfect way. So definitely don't think any part of your chart is bad or is negative. If you have, you know, an opposition or a square aspect, there'll obviously be challenges and lessons in learning how to channel both of those planets effectively, or how to use them both effectively. But the aspects are a really fascinating way to see how the expression of whatever it is that we want may be affected, or may be influenced by something or someone else. So as I was saying to you last week when we were talking about Neptune, I said people with Neptunian aspects tend to be very, very intuitive, very sensitive, but also more prone to addiction, or depression, or boundary issues. And that's because, you know, Neptune is such a big, boundary dissolving, dreamlike, illusory planet, that when it has maybe a conjunction to the sun or the moon, or an opposition to maybe your Venus or Mars or something, it's like this big bucket of water is being thrown over that planet and kind of drowning it out. So that's why I always say for people that have strong Neptune aspects, it's so important to channel your Neptune and protect your energy and protect your boundaries and do all those sorts of things, so that the other planets can express themselves without being drowned by the sensitivity of the Neptune. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's a really this is when you start experimenting with different parts of your chart. So do have a look and tell me what you think of some of the aspects in your own chart. Also, so we have spoken about conjunctions, inconjunctions, squares, and oppositions. A trine is like good friends. A trine is like supportive. One helps the other out. They help each other achieve their goals. They really get each other. They like each other. So if you have a trine, it's like those two planets and how they're expressing themselves. They like each other. So often you'll have trines between planets that share the same element. So you might have, if you have a sun in Libra, which of course is an air sign, and a moon in Gemini. So you might have a sun trine moon aspect depending on the degrees. And it's like that airy information processing moon in Gemini understands the justice, communication, focus of the sun in Libra. So they help each other out. So trines are really nice as well. And a sextile is like energizing. It's like a really friendly neighbor. It's like, you know, they'll come and help you out with something, or they, you know, sometimes they wake you up in the morning a bit early, but they're friendly, it's positive, it's kind of, there's a lot of movement there. So if there's a sextile between planets, this is something that's kind of, they kind of jazz each other up. They're generally supportive of each other. And so again, those would be what we would consider good aspects. But people that have lots and lots of those good aspects, there's still a challenge in not taking things for granted, or there's still a challenge in having to form your own morals, or having to form your own sense of right and wrong in some way. So, you know, a lot of dictators actually have a chart full of trines and sextiles, which means that their life was very easy. No one stood up to them, no one called them on their shit, and they were allowed to become dangerous or over-controlling. So you can see how, whereas a lot of healers tend to have a lot of squares and oppositions, and so you can see how we need that mixture of all of the different aspects to help all of our planets express it themselves, you know, and help each other. But if there's a part of your life that you're interested in kind of activating more, so say it was, you know, you'd like to bring relationship into your life, so of course we're looking at Venus and maybe the moon to some extent as well, having a look at what natal aspects there are to your Venus or to your moon, if that's what you're looking at, would help you to activate that. So like I said, if you had that moon square Pluto, you could break the habit of attracting these very egotistical, power-hungry types by seeking out to meet people, you know, at events like political events or rallies or protests or causes that you care about, which is very Plutonian as well. Or, you know, even empowerment events or conferences or Tony Robbins events, those types of things. So that would help your Venus express itself. So aspects are so fascinating in that way. What else? I think that's pretty much everything you need to know about aspects. Like I said, at this point, you don't have to worry too much about the degrees or calculating aspects or anything like that. It is, all of your personal natal aspects are all in that table there. So they're the ones to focus on the most. Looking now at transits, okay, transits are what the current planets are doing. So I'm going to talk about those in a second.